Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are really cutting through the noise on two huge financial announcements.
Huge is the right word.
Absolutely. They could potentially put some serious money back in your pocket. But,
Yeah.
as always, we have to separate what's a guarantee, what's locked in by law, from what's still just a big proposal.
That's the critical distinction.
Our sources today are all focused on that. We're looking at economic analyses, legislative reports, and presidential statements on, first, President Trump's recent promises about the largest tax refund season ever, especially for older Americans.
Right.
And second, that highly publicized idea for $2,000 tariff dividend checks.
The one everyone's been talking about.
Exactly. And when you hear numbers like largest refund ever or a $2,000 check, the emotional impact is it's undeniable.
Of course.
For so many people, especially if you're on a fixed income, that money isn't for a vacation. It's about the essentials.
It's rent, it's groceries.
It's catching up on rent, stocking the fridge, maybe finally paying down that credit card balance that's been hanging over your head. So we really owe it to you to get this analysis right. So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We need to figure out which of these announcements is actually rooted in a law that's already signed and delivered.
Guarantee.
The solid financial guarantee. And which part is still, well, just a proposal facing a whole gauntlet of political, mathematical, and maybe even legal hurdles. Okay, let's unpack this.
And that distinction is really the only thing that matters right now. One of these benefits comes from a law passed earlier this year. The other is a future goal, one that needs Congress, the Treasury, maybe even the Supreme Court to all get on the same page.
Okay, so let's start with the solid foundation, the good news. The projected larger tax refunds for the 2026 tax season. This is the part that's based on an existing law, right?
That's right. I know there was some confusion, but this is the real deal. The projected increase in tax refunds is tied directly to legislation that was signed earlier this year.
And that legislation is
It's technically known as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Now, the name is obviously political, designed to be memorable.
Sure.
But the function of the law itself is very technical, and it's really important for taxpayers.
So can you break down the practical mechanism for us? Why are taxpayers and, particularly retirees or seniors expected to see a bigger refund?
Essentially, this act goes back and addresses parts of the 2017 tax cuts. The crucial thing is it expands and makes certain features permanent, but only for middle and lower income earners.
Okay, so it's targeted.
Very targeted. The main insight here isn't a huge rate cut, but more about rate stability and, even more importantly, a really substantial increase in the standard deduction.
And that's critical, especially for seniors. A lot of them just rely on the standard deduction. Can you give us some numbers on that increase?
Certainly. For the 2026 filing year, the law raises that standard deduction threshold quite a bit. You can think of the standard deduction as the portion of your income that the government just agrees won't be taxed at all. No questions asked.
A zero tax zone for that first chunk of income.
Exactly. And for a married couple filing jointly, that threshold is projected to go up by a really substantial margin.
Yeah.
For many older Americans, that change alone could move them into a lower tax bracket, or even eliminate their tax liability entirely.
Especially if they're mainly on Social Security and, some modest retirement savings.
Precisely. And on top of that, the law also adjusts the income limits for the lower tax brackets. So a larger slice of your income will fall into the 10% or 12% tiers instead of getting pushed into the higher ones.
So if I'm a single person making, say, $50,000, less of my money gets hit with those higher rates.
That's the idea. You're guaranteed to keep more money right off the bat, simply because a larger part of your income is protected from taxes. It's a solid financial win.
And what do the projections say? What does this actually look like in dollars and cents?
Well, when data firms run the simulations, they estimate the average refund could go up by hundreds of dollars. For some families, it might even be over $1,000.
Oh.
Of course, it depends on everyone's individual situation. But the foundation for that claim that 2026 could bring larger refunds, that is already signed into law.
And we know from polls that this isn't just fun money for people.
Not at all. It's vital. The data is so clear on this. For many families, a tax refund is the largest single amount of cash they see all year.
I believe that.
Think about it. Over 60% of middle-income families have revolving credit card debt. For them, an extra $1,000 isn't just breathing room.
No, it's a lifeline.
It's paying off a high-interest balance, which saves them hundreds more in interest payments down the line. It's covering medical copays or a home repair they've been putting off. This relief provides real security.
Okay, that gives us a really clear picture of the guaranteed benefit. Now let's shift gears
To the complicated
to
part.
the far more complicated and frankly much bigger promise. Those proposed $2,000 tariff dividend checks. This is the announcement that really set the political world on fire.
And this is where we leave the solid ground of existing law and step right into the political messaging arena.
The confidence behind the proposal has just been striking. The justification from the president is that the government is collecting so much tariff money from China and others
Trillions, he said.
that working and middle-income Americans deserve a piece of it. Specifically, $2,000 per person, excluding high earners. It's been presented with such certainty, almost like past stimulus payments. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Indeed, because that certainty runs headlong into the cold reality of math, Congress, and the courts.
All right, let's tackle that first hurdle head on. The numbers. The message is trillions of dollars from tariffs. Is that even in the ballpark?
It's not. It's a vast exaggeration. I mean, the government does collect a lot of money.
Yeah.
But when economists and nonpartisan groups look at the actual books,
What do they see?
they cite this year's tariff revenue as being approximately $258 billion.
Okay, so $258 billion. That is a massive number.
It's a huge number, but it is nowhere near trillions.
Yeah.
Not even close.
So we have $258 billion coming in. How does that line up against the cost of sending out $2,000 checks?
It lines up poorly, very poorly. Even if you manage to perfectly exclude every single high-income household, which is a huge logistical challenge in itself, sending $2,000 to everyone who qualifies would still cost the Treasury roughly $300 billion.
Wait, say that again. So the cost of the checks is more than the total amount of money the tariffs are bringing in.
Exactly. Just to fund the checks, you're already starting with a $42 billion shortfall. And that's before you even consider the other immense financial pressures the government is under.
And the deficit.
And this is all happening against the backdrop of a federal deficit that's sitting at about $1.8 trillion.
So that $300 billion isn't just coming from tariffs. A big chunk would have to be borrowed.
Or diverted from other essential programs, yes. The economic reality is this is not free money. It's borrowed money, regardless of where they say it's coming from.
Which leads us directly to that second massive hurdle. Congress has to approve this. It's just a proposal for now, correct?
Strictly a proposal. The president cannot just sign an order for the Treasury to print checks of this magnitude. It requires an appropriation from Congress.
And Congress is divided, to put it mildly.
That's a good way to put it.
Huh.
What's the temperature in Congress on this specific $2,000 amount? It's chilly.
Chilly.
We know the Treasury Secretary has said they're looking at options, maybe direct payments, maybe tax relief, maybe something else entirely. But the key takeaway is that nothing has been approved yet.
So no consensus at all.
No. Many Republicans are hesitant. They see the math problem. You have some lawmakers, like Senator Josh Hawley, who pushed for a much smaller $600 rebate. But even that bill just failed to gain any real momentum. The consensus among budget hawks is that $2,000 is simply unrealistic.
Okay, so the math is a problem, Congress is a problem. And if that wasn't enough, there's a third, maybe even more unpredictable hurdle.
The Supreme Court wildcard.
This adds a whole layer of deep legal risk to the tariff money itself.
This is a huge issue that you almost never hear about outside of, legal journals. But the Supreme Court is actively reviewing the administration's use of its tariff powers.
What's the specific challenge?
It centers on how the administration used the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA.
The key word there being emergency.
Exactly. The legal question is whether the current trade disputes, even the really aggressive ones, legally count as a national emergency under that law's very strict definition. It's not about whether tariffs are a good or bad idea. It's about the legal authority used to put them in place.
So what happens if the court says, no, this wasn't a legal use of that emergency power?
The fallout for this dividend check proposal would be catastrophic. If the court rules the tariffs were illegally implemented, the government could owe massive refunds to all the companies that paid those tariffs for years.
So instead of a $258 billion revenue stream to help pay for the checks,
You'd be looking at a multi-billion-dollar liability. The money would be flowing out of the Treasury, not in. We even heard Justice Amy Coney Barrett express concern about the potential administrative mess this could create. So if that tariff revenue stream suddenly dries up, or worse, has to be repaid, the chances of seeing a $2,000 check become almost zero.
It's got to be so frustrating for people listening to this. You hear the promise of $2,000. I mean, that could pay off a loan or give you a cushion for months. And then you realize the path is just littered with these massive obstacles.
I absolutely understand that frustration. But we have to step back and look at the fundamental economics of how tariffs even work. We have to remember that tariffs, they are not free.
What do you mean by that? The cost isn't free?
Well, a tariff is basically a tax on imported goods. That cost is almost never absorbed by the foreign country.
So China doesn't just eat the cost?
No. It gets passed down the line to the American importer, then to the American retailer, and then finally to you, the American consumer. It shows up as higher prices on everything.
So you're paying the tax yourself at the register?
You are. So when the government then proposes to collect all that money and send it back to you in a check, it's the classic taking money from one pocket and putting it into the other scenario.
That's a very clear analogy, but let's go a little deeper. Are there hidden economic costs beyond just that transfer?
Absolutely. The one pocket to the other analogy is a bit too simple, really.
Yeah.
Economists talk about something called deadweight loss.
Deadweight loss.
It's the cost to the economy that nobody gets back. Not the government, not the consumer. It's the pure economic inefficiency created when a consumer ends up buying a cheaper, less desirable domestic product just because their preferred imported product got too expensive because of the tariff. That loss of choice, that loss of efficiency is a real hidden cost that the checks don't fix.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, it sounds like the administration is trying to do 3 different things at once, and those goals are working against each other.
That is the key synthesis right there. They want to reduce the national debt. They want to give people money to help with costs. And they want to pressure foreign countries with tariffs. You cannot do all 3 of those things at the same time.
They're in conflict.
They're in direct conflict. For instance, if you use that $258 billion in tariff money to fund the dividend checks, then obviously that same money can't be used to pay down the $1.8 trillion deficit.
Right.
And what if the tariffs actually work as intended and reduce imports from China? Well, then the revenue stream you're counting on for the checks, it disappears. And if China retaliates, which they almost always do, prices here go up even more. It's a fundamental paradox.
Which brings us to the final summary, what you, the listener, need to know as you plan your finances. So what does this all mean?
Let's boil it down.
Let's recap. Could you, especially as a retiree or a middle-income family, see a significantly larger tax refund next year? Yes. That part is realistic.
That's the solid ground.
It's tied to that actual law, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It's already in effect. It guarantees things like the higher standard deduction for the 2026 tax season. You can rely on that. But could you see a $2,000 tariff check? It's technically possible, but it is absolutely not guaranteed.
And honestly, not likely.
Not likely. Given the math, the need for full congressional approval, and that huge Supreme Court wildcard hanging over the whole thing, it remains, for now, a political proposal.
And to leave you with one final thought to mull over, just consider that balancing act we talked about. Between the national debt and that dividend check promise, the real question isn't just which policy should win. It's whether the immediate political appeal of proposing a $2,000 check today is worth more than the guaranteed long-term economic stability that could come from using the same $258 billion to start chipping away at the $1.8 trillion debt that our kids and grandkids will have to deal with. That's the tension right at the heart of all this.
A profound point to consider. We hope this knowledge helps you navigate these financial promises with a much clearer understanding of the facts. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today.